You can go ahead.
Okay, my name is Jonah, and this is the story about when me and my family moved to Concordia, and also telling about a lesson about how I learned about the temporariness of this life through that. Now, how many of you live in the dorms, just by a show of hands? All right, how many of you have moved before? Okay, so a lot of you may be able to at least somewhat empathize with what I'm going to be talking about today. So before we moved here, there had never really been a big change in my life. I'd switched from grade school to high school, and we'd switched churches and other smaller things like that. But my home had always been the same. So like after school or an activity like that, I would always have my home to go to and just relax and just be comfortable there. And it was always the same place on Birchwood Street in Farmington, Michigan. So, but then after my sophomore year of high school, my parents told us that we might be moving to Missouri. And really, initially, I was excited about that. Like, I always thought that it would be cool to move to a new place and have that experience. Like, I mean, I think I knew people that had moved, but I myself had never moved. So, and on top of that, I'm sure there was a lot of hypothetical thought, thinking about things in Missouri, like what it would be like there, what my school would be like, and just a whole bunch of other things that really I didn't know about, but I could think about what it might be like. So, and moving there was a lot of, like, moving is a process. I'm sure that anyone who's moved knows that, or even anyone who's gone on a vacation where you've had to pack a lot of stuff knows that. But, so, like, I personally had to, like, go through things in my room, of which there were plenty, and we had to move things out of our house, which we had a lot of help with, which is where some other communication lessons came up. Like, since there were a lot of people, there was a lot of interpersonal communication, so I got practice at that, and some of the people were new that I had to talk to, so kind of, I guess, learning how to communicate with new people. And also the group communication, since we all had the goal of helping us to get stuff out of our house and into the moving truck, had to communicate effectively so that we could get that goal. And also listening mainly to my parents, that I could know where to move whatever, or what to put in what box, or where to put something in the moving van, or when we need to put a protective cloth over something, or when somebody had their head that was about to get smashed by a piano between a wall as we were moving it up the stairs. But yeah, just different things like that were all part of moving. And we also did have to take a couple trips down here to get all our stuff down. So that was just part of the process. And so at the end of July is when we came here. We left a little bit later than we expected to that day, because when we had been moving one of the things out of our house, we didn't realize that our cat had been sleeping. It was in like a bed spring of my parents' bed, and so when we were looking for our cat, when we were about to get ready to move, we couldn't find her anywhere, and so we just ate lunch and had just prayed that we would find our cat. And I walked out to we had our big U-Haul truck and a little U-Haul trailer, and I walked out to the trailer because I think I was just like checking to see if, like, what stuff needed to be moved so that we could fit other stuff in there. And I heard meowing coming from the trailer, and so I ran back in, and I was like, our cat is in the U-Haul. So that delayed our leaving a little bit, but we didn't leave that day still, and we stopped at my grandparents' house in St. Louis that night. We drove through the night and got there around 3 a.m. So, and then the next day we drove the rest of the way to Concordia. And that day we moved our stuff out of the U-Haul and into Heilman, which is where most of our stuff stayed until we moved to our home we live in now, which was at the end of my junior year, was when we moved there. And my parents moved into what I considered my home for a little bit, which was room 301 in Built. because that's where I would always go after school to talk to my parents, and it was where I felt comfortable because there were a lot of things from my home in Michigan that made it feel like home in Concordia because of like my parents were there and it was a comfortable place for me to just do homework and things like that. And of course, moving to Concordia, there were a lot of adjustments that had to be made because even though Concordia was new for me and for my family, it wasn't, well, the story of Concordia had already been going on for a long time, and we were just being added to the story and had to learn how to adjust to life in Concordia. And it was a pretty quick adjustment for me personally. I pretty quickly got involved with things like, before school started, I practiced with the soccer team for a couple weeks, and so got to meet some people through that. I met Doc Schmidt, or I called him Coach Schmidt more often then since I was practicing with the soccer team, and some friends through practicing. And I also got a job at Creamy Freeze, which helped me to meet some people also. And yeah, so really with the new home, there was a lot of lessons that were learned. For one thing, since I had moved, I was able to empathize with other people who had moved before, or at least partially empathize with them. So like, when I had a friend that moved from Michigan to Colorado, it was like the next year or something, I was able to understand some of the emotions that she was telling me about. And also I learned about like, the change in home really taught me a lot too, because I learned that my home will change while I'm living here, and just that I'll move to different places in my life. But on top of that, it taught me about the temporariness of this life, just because before I'd been in Michigan and I figured that's how it was always going to be, and I never really thought about moving anywhere. But then when we did move somewhere, it really helped me grasp that this life is temporary and that our eternal home is in heaven, and that's a very important lesson that I learned through this.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Jonah.